مين على مصر مين يبعت سلامي في كلمتين يا هلا الله مشتاق لناسنا الطيبين ودي ياما فيها مخلصين يا ما شاء الله وأصغر العلماء تقدر تقول ما تشاء الله بدعي لهم رب السماء وقولوا آمين إن شاء الله إن شاء الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. قال الإمام النووي رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. وحيث أقول الجديد فالقديم خلافه أو القديم أو في قول قديم فالجديد خلافه. Going on with the introduction of Minhaj Al-talibin, the book of Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, where he is speaking about the terminology that he is using or he's going to use in this book. And he is now talking about two terms, Al-Jadid and Al-Qadim. When we were talking about the life of Imam Al-Shafi'i in the earlier lessons of this series, we talked about how Imam Al-Shafi'i had developed his new school when he was in Baghdad, and he had developed his old school when he was in Baghdad, which he then changed when he came to Egypt, and he developed his new school in Egypt. And we talked about what that meant at that time. So here Imam An-Nawawi is simply referring to that on those issues on which Imam Al-Shafi'i had changed his opinion when he came to Egypt, where he developed his Jadid school. He will point that out. Imam An-Nawawi will point out the Jadid position is this, and therefore when he says that, kaza fil Jadid, then he's indicating to the reader that this is an issue on which Imam Al-Shafi'i changed his position, and this is his new school. His opinion in the older school is contrary to this. Okay, contrary to this. For example, Imam An-Nawawi says in Minhaj Al-talibin that the Jadid position of Imam Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala with regards to the time of Maghrib prayer is that the Maghrib prayer ends after a certain amount of time has passed after sunset. The amount of time that it takes to roughly perform wudu and get ready for prayer and perform 5 rak'at, 3 rak'at of fard and 2 rak'at sunnah. So roughly whatever amount of time it usually takes for one to get ready for prayer and perform 5 rak'at of prayer, that is the duration of the time of Maghrib. After this time passes, the time for Maghrib has ended, and therefore if somebody delays Maghrib beyond that point, then they are making up prayer, the Maghrib prayer outside of its allotted time. This is the Jadid position of Imam Al-Shafi'i. The Qadim position of Imam Al-Shafi'i is also mentioned in Minhaj Al-talibin, which says that the time for Maghrib lasts all the way until the time for Isha begins, which is the disappearance of the red light from the horizon. So, Qadim, Jadid, the new school, the old school. Now, in most of the cases, the Jadid position of Imam al-Shafi'i is what becomes the preponderant position of the school in most of the cases. And yet there's about 18 issues on which it is the Qadim position of Imam al-Shafi'i, the old school of Imam al-Shafi'i, which is the preponderant view in the school. And the Jadid position, the new school, is considered to be the weaker position in the school. And this is one example of that, the time of Maghrib. That despite the fact that the Qadim position says that it is the Qadim position that says that the time of Maghrib lasts all the way until the time of Isha enters, that is the position that is preponderant in the school. And the Jadid position, despite being the new position, is the weaker position in the school. And that happens for reasons that we can't really get into in this basic series that we're doing, but basically the later authorities in the Shafi'i school, they are the ones who make that decision. By later meaning those who came after Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, including Imam al-Nawawi and Imam al-Rafi'i. They are the ones who make that decision when the Qadim position, despite being Qadim, is given preponderance in the school. And generally that's due to the reasoning, the evidences, the legal reasoning behind those opinions. However, I will mention a few things about Qadim and Jadid. And one is that in those issues, the 18 issues on which the Qadim position is given preponderance in the school, many scholars have argued, the later scholars, people like the author of Al-Fawaid al-Madaniyah, Sheikh Sulaiman al-Kurdi, and also recent researchers who have written books about this issue in their master's theses and PhD theses, they have argued that on almost all of those 18 issues on which the school considers the older position of Imam al-Shafi'i to be preponderant, on all of those issues, the fact of the matter is that Imam al-Shafi'i held multiple opinions in Egypt. And one of those opinions matched his older position in Baghdad. So in essence, they are actually preferring one of multiple new school positions of Imam al-Shafi'i over one another, not preferring his old school over the new school. So this is the scenario that they're mentioning. They're saying that Imam al-Shafi'i in the Qadim, for example, says that Maghrib goes until Isha. Whereas in Al-Jadid, he says it goes until, let's say, 15 minutes or so, or 30 minutes or so, okay, after Maghrib enters. But they're saying that actually there's another opinion in the Jadid school itself. In other words, Imam Shafi'i has another opinion in Egypt itself that it goes until Isha. And therefore, when they give preponderance to this view, it's over this view, and not necessarily giving preponderance to Qadim over Jadid. No, it's giving preponderance to one Jadid over another Jadid. So some of them have argued that. And you can read more about this if you want in a couple of research papers that were written recently. One is called Al-Imam al-Shafi'i bayna madhhabayhi al-Qadim wal-Jadid, and another one that's called Al-Jadid wal-Qadim fi fiqh al-Imam al-Shafi'i. The other thing that I would like to point out at this point is the reason why Imam al-Shafi'i changed his school when he came to Cairo. The popular opinion about this is that Imam al-Shafi'i changed his opinions because when he came to Egypt, he saw a different culture. He saw different customary practices. He saw that the circumstances, the new circumstances that he found himself in, forced him to come to different conclusions to suit the circumstances of the people that he was now living in. This is the popular belief about why Imam al-Shafi'i changed his opinions from Qadim to Jadid. However, this has been proven to be false. This is not the reason why Imam al-Shafi'i changed his school from old to new. In fact, this might be a very small reason, but this is by no means the major cause for him changing his opinions. The real cause for him changing his school from old to new school is that when he came to Egypt, he met the students of Al-Layth ibn Sa'ad. He met other scholars in Egypt that he hadn't met before. There was a great culture of scholarship that existed in Egypt, the great debates that used to take place between the students of Imam Malik and the students of Imam Abu Hanifa in Egypt. And when he came to Egypt, he had discussions and arguments with many of these scholars, which caused him to reconsider some of his earlier positions. Because of his dialogues and interaction and exchanges with the scholarly community of Egypt, it made him reconsider some of his earlier legal positions, and he was forced to modify and change some of those positions due to those exchanges that he had. So it was merely a mujtahid imam developing in his own ijtihad, developing in his own expertise in legal reasoning, not necessarily that he was affected by the customary practices of the new land that he found himself in. It was merely a result of a scholar growing in his scholarship and changing his perspective on how he looks at the evidences that he was looking at before from a different perspective. That's one reason. Another reason why Imam al-Shafi'i changed his position, changed his school from the old school to the new school. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. محمد رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الدعوة التامة والصلاة وسيلة فضيلة وبعث مقام محمودا الذي وعدت انك لا تولي So another reason why Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah changed his school when he came to Egypt, in addition to what I just mentioned, is that Imam Shafi'i came across a number of scholars in Egypt who he learned hadith from that he didn't know before. And after he was exposed to some of these new texts of the Prophet ﷺ that he wasn't aware of before, that naturally made him change some of the opinions that he had held before. Because now he had access to prophetic texts, and if these texts were related to issues that he was dealing with before without these texts, now he could develop a better opinion, a more authentic opinion, if you will, a stronger opinion, because he had these texts available to him that he didn't have before. And this is proven by the mere fact that if we look at the ahadith that Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah narrates in books like Musnad al-Imam al-Shafi'i and other books of Imam al-Shafi'i, where he narrates the ahadith that he knew, if we notice that the shuyukh of Imam al-Shafi'i, we notice that many of those shuyukh are Egyptians. Many of those shuyukh are Egyptians, and therefore it seems that many of his shuyukh in hadith were Egyptians, and he came to know them after he moved to Egypt, which would have influenced many of the opinions that he had held before he came across those ahadith. And for more information on this issue, you can refer to the book of Al-Qawasimi by the name of Al-Madkhal ila Madhhab al-Imam al-Shafi'i, printed by, I believe, Darul Nafa'is, where he deals with this issue of why Imam al-Shafi'i changed his school when he came to Egypt, and argues what I have just argued in front of you, as well, in addition to the two books that I mentioned earlier, insha'Allah ta'ala. And also, just the last thing before we move on, this idea that Imam al-Shafi'i changed his school because of the customary practices of the new land that he moved to, it is proven false by a mere survey of the issues on which he changed his position. Because what we find when we do that survey is that most of those issues have to do with ibadat, have to do with acts of devotion. And acts of devotion are not things that change because of a change in time and place. The time of Maghrib is not going to change when the time of Maghrib is supposed to end, whether it lasts till Isha or it lasts only 15 or 20 or 30 minutes after it comes in. That issue is not going to change between Egypt and Baghdad because of cultural differences. And other issues that are similar to this issue, issues related to acts of worship, acts of devotion, they're not issues that are related to marriage, divorce, transactions, things that are generally related to customary practices. These are not those kinds of issues, and therefore to argue that he changed his opinion merely because of the change in customary practice seems to have almost no evidence for that. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Then Imam al-Nawawi says, وَحَيْثُ أَقُولُ الْجَدِيدُ فَالْقَدِيمُ خِلَافُهُ أَوْ الْقَدِيمُ أَوْ فِي قَوْلٍ قَدِيمٍ فَالْجَدِيدُ خِلَافُهُ وحيث أقول وقيل كذا فهو وجه ضعيف والصحيح أو الأصح خلافه. So when he says وقيل كذا, وقيل, that indicates that this is a wajh. That number one, and number two, that it is da'if. Okay, and that the mu'tamad position is the opposite of this. The preponderant position is the opposite of this position. But what we don't know is whether this mu'tamad is sahih or asah. We don't know that. And therefore Imam al-Nawawi says, waqila, to indicate that the preponderant position is the opposite, though he's not sure the martabatul khilaf here, whether this qila, is it weak or is it strong? In other words, is the contrary position sahih or asah, as we talked about before, the meaning of what sahih and asah are. وحيث أقول وفي قول كذا فالراجح خلافه. Same thing applies to وَفِي قَوْلٍ. When he says وَفِي قَوْلٍ, وَفِي قَوْلٍ, that means that that is a qawl of Imam al-Shafi'i. It's a qawl of Imam al-Shafi'i that's da'if. And the mu'tamad is the opposite of that, and that's either adhar or mashhur. ومنها مسائل نفيسة أضمها إليه ينبغي ألا يخلى الكتاب منها وأقول في أولها قلت وفي آخرها والله أعلم. Then he says, وَمِنْهَا مَسَائِلُ نَفِيسَةٌ أَضُمُّهَا إِلَيْهِ يَنْبَغِي أَلَّا يُخْلَى الْكِتَابُ مِنْهَا وَأَقُولُ فِي أَوَّلِهَا قُلْتُ وَفِي آخِرِهَا وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. That there are also issues that I will bring into this book of mine, meaning Minhaj Al-talibin, that are not found in Al-Muharrar. And these are issues that I feel that such a book should not be without. They're important fiqhi issues that I will bring into this book. وَأَقُولُ فِي أَوَّلِهَا قُلْتُ وَفِي آخِرِهَا أَعْلَمُ. And any such issue, he's going to enclose it between the statement قُلْتُ and the statement وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. So anytime he wants to insert something new in Muharrar, he will separate that by Qultu and Wallahu A'lam. And then in the middle he will say what he wants to insert. And this is the epitome of honesty, academic honesty, separating the words of the original from his own words, always distinguishing what is his from what is the work of the original author. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on Imam al-Nawawi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on Imam al-Rafi'i and all of the scholars of this great school of thought, as well as the scholars of other great Sunni schools of thought. And then he continues with the rest of the introduction of Minhaj Al-talibin that we are not going to go into, because this is the end of the portion where he talks about the terminology of Minhaj Al-talibin. So the rest of the introduction has to do with other issues that are not the scope of this series, insha'Allah ta'ala. So we'll stop here, and with this we come to the conclusion of this series, which was intended bi'idhnillahi ta'ala to provide a guide for a serious student of knowledge who wishes to pursue studies in the school of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this effort from myself, from the rest of the staff here at Jami' al-Azhar al-Sharif. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you and benefit you from what you have heard in this series. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open the path for you and all students of knowledge around the world, the path to seeking the sacred sciences, the Islamic sciences. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us ikhlas. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us sincerity in our study of the religious sciences and in all of our actions and in all of our affairs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this knowledge an evidence for us on the Day of Judgment and not an evidence against us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who practice what they learn, who implement what they learn, who act upon what they learn. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our shortcomings and accept from us whatever good He has blessed us to do. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
العلماء لهم فضل ومنزلة ووجههم عند مولى الفضل مقبول. قوم إلى الله قد شدت عزائمهم وحبلهم بحبال الله موصول. قوم على الملة السمحاء قد فطروا وشأنهم مع كتاب الله منقول. أعطاهم الله ما شاءوا وأكرمهم كذاك قال الذي وفاه جبريل. يا ربنا خذ بنا قلبا لساحتهم لنستريح ويحمى القال والقيل. العلماء لهم جاه ومنزلة ووجههم عند مولى الفضل مقبول.